What if the top retirement regrets of elderly retirees in their 70s and 80s are totally avoidable if you just put a few things in place in your 40s and 50s? In this video, I'll share the top 5 retirement regrets of retirees in their 70s and 80s. I'll also share what I've done about them, and I'm still doing things that you can do too. I've put this video together after lots of research on the topic. I've watched hours and hours of YouTube video. I've read papers on the topic from experts and authorities on retirement. I've read countless books, newspaper articles, blog posts. I have heavily researched this topic in order to improve my retirement and so that you can benefit too from this research. Why have I done this? So that I can have a really good retirement. It's as simple as that. I don't want to make the mistakes that are very common. If there's research out there on this topic, then I want to know about it, and that's why I've investigated it so thoroughly. I don't want to have a retirement where I suffer. I want to have a retirement that I'm really enjoying, because at the end of the day, that's the whole point of retirement, to be free and to enjoy your life, to do what you want to do, whenever you want to do it, with whoever you want to do it with. Let me be clear, I'm not here to preach. I'm here to reflect on my findings. I've faced some of these regrets. Unfortunately, I have made a few as well, but I've managed to avoid most of them. If you're in your 40s or 50s, or even your 60s like me, there's still time to avoid all of them. This video is for you. I'm 64 now. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I quit work at 44. I think I was retired at that age. That's how I feel about it now. Back then, I saw it more as a career break. It's just that I never went back to full-time work. So in reality, I retired. And since then, I've been constantly asking myself this question: am I doing life right? And I don't just mean money-wise, I mean meaning-wise. What is the meaning of life after you've retired? So I did the research, so you don't have to. I wanted to find out what happens to 70-odd-year-olds and 80-odd-year-olds and even 90-odd-year-olds when they get it wrong. What do they really wish they had done differently? Here's what I found from all that research. There were dozens of regrets, but there were 5 that kept cropping up over and over again. Let me walk you through them and share with you how I handled them and how I'm still handling them, because after all, retirement is a journey that never ends until death. I don't want to have regrets in my 70s and 80s, and neither should you. Some of them, I've completely nailed them. Others, I haven't. As I said earlier, they're still a work in progress, because retirement is like an unfinished piece of art. You keep going back to the canvas and putting on another brushstroke, trying to create that perfect piece of art. You are constantly refining it, adding new brushstrokes all the time. So here are the top 5 retirement regrets of elderly retirees in their 70s and 80s. Regret number 5, not taking up hobbies earlier. So many retirees said this one. They wished they had taken up their hobbies much earlier, particularly whilst they were still at work. Now, that's not easy. I found that very hard. I have to be honest. I was completely consumed by my work in my 20s, my 30s and my early 40s, and there was no time at all for hobbies. But looking back, that was a mistake. I really should have done something about that, because it really did bite me on the arse when I retired early. Many retirees wish that they'd done more creating, building, writing, playing music, photographing, whatever your passion is. They wish they'd spent more time on something that was a passion and a joy to them. And when work ended, they wished they'd done more about it then. But what did they do instead? They wasted time. They let the days drift by, aimlessly wandering round the shopping mall with their wife or their husband or their friends, or spending countless hours watching the news or reading newspapers. And to be honest, I neglected this one too. The first 12 months of retirement were hell. I spent most of my time in my dressing gown playing online poker until the middle of the afternoon. What a waste of life. And I do regret that now. However, those days are long in the past. But if you're in your 40s or your 50s and you retire early, don't do that. Whatever you do, make a plan. Try and figure out exactly what you're going to do with your time. And if you haven't done it yet, take up some hobbies. find out something that's really going to ignite your interest and your passion. It's going to be all important when you retire. Regret number 4 is not spending more money early in retirement. This one surprises many people. Most retirees have a saving mentality, not a spending mentality. They have a frugal attitude towards money because they think they've got to make their money really last. But here's the bit they get wrong. If their retirement is going to be 30 years or 40 years, they don't realise that the first part of that retirement, they're probably going to be healthy and energetic and have the mental capacity to do things that they're not going to have when they get into their 70s, 80s and 90s. What you should be doing is front loading your spending into those years when you can be active, because what's going to happen is your spending is likely to decline as you get into your 70s and 80s. Many people, once they retire, they actually deny themselves things, and then they hit their 70s and realise, I haven't got the health now to do the things that I want to do, and I didn't do them 10 or 20 years ago. Their knees hurt, their energy drops, they start developing illnesses, and they've missed the window to do the big stuff. People who really get it wrong stay at work far too long, even though they can retire financially. Fortunately, I avoided this. I retired early enough so that I had the money and the health and the mentality to be able to really get the most out of those years. In my late 40s and early to mid 50s, I spent a lot of time with my family. We travelled extensively. I won't go into too much detail here because I've talked about this a lot in previous videos, but I didn't miss out on that. I got a few things wrong. I was still motivated to some extent by stuff, and again, I've made videos on that topic, so I'm not going into any great detail here. I bought the sports cars, I bought the stuff, I did all of that, and that is now a thing of the past too. I didn't want to be trapped one day by failing health. When I look at my poor Uncle Archie, who's now 95, he lost his wife when he was 82. And she was ill for a good 10 years before that. So the reality is, from 72 to 82, him and his wife couldn't do anything. Then she died at 77 when he was 82. And since he was 82, he's kind of just drifted through life. He's done absolutely nothing. None of the things that I think he was hoping to do, because his wife didn't survive. And his life hasn't been good ever since. For me, I aimed to be retired and free at a young enough age to enjoy it. So here's the message. Spend whilst you're young enough to enjoy it, whilst you're young enough and healthy enough to be able to do the things that are going to really ignite you. Time is your most valuable currency. Regret number 3, not travelling more when younger. So many people put off travelling until later, especially if they stay in work well into their 60s. They assume they're going to go travelling in their 60s and their 70s. And guess what? Later never comes. A bit like my Uncle Archie. His wife gets ill when he was 72 and he did absolutely nothing after that. So yes, opportunity can be restricted by ill health. As I mentioned earlier, I made travel a priority in my 40s and 50s. I'm glad I got it out of the way, because now I'm 64 and I've had a few health problems myself. I don't feel like doing those long haul holidays and those far-flung destinations that I was more than happy to do when I was in my late 40s and early 50s. I had the stamina to hike and explore and examine new cultures. Now I haven't. Holidays and travel are now much closer to home. Scotland and Portugal mostly, and I've got no regrets because I've done the travelling. So if you're in your 50s and your 60s, don't wait, don't delay that trip that you've always planned. If you've got a bucket list, and I've got one, start ticking it off now. Don't wait until you're in your 70s or 80s, because you might not get the chance. My Uncle Archie didn't. Regret number 2 is neglecting their health. This one really hits home, particularly because of my recent experience with having my gallbladder out. I was always pretty fit and healthy all the way through into my 50s. Started getting a few niggles in my mid-50s, but nothing major, nothing that was going to stop me. Then bam, gallbladder problems. All of it caused by neglecting my health in my 30s and 40s and even my 50s. A bad diet, not enough exercise, overweight, the usual things. I could have done without the wake-up call of losing my gallbladder, but a wake-up call it has been. I'm now 4 stone lighter than I was in my mid-50s. I walk at least 10,000 steps every single day. I work out at the gym, although I have to admit I haven't done much of that since I had the gallbladder out, but I'll be returning to it soon. I think I'm recovered enough now to start pumping some iron again. I realised that I should have tackled these things much earlier, probably in my 40s. I had no excuse. Having retired at 44, I had plenty of time on my hands to tackle them. It's just that I didn't. Time drifted, and so did my weight, upwards. But at 64, I've still got time to do something about it, and I am. And if you're in your 40s, or your 50s, or your early 60s, I don't wish to preach, but so should you, because the clock is ticking. The final regret number 1, is wishing they had retired earlier. This one is the most common regret. I'm going to mention a book again. Somebody in a comment recently said, oh, you're getting boring, you're always mentioning this book. Well, tough, because I'm going to mention it again. I'm going to ram home the message. The book is by a lady called Bronnie Ware. She is a palliative care nurse who tended the dying in their later stages. And the biggest regret for men in particular was this one: I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I want you to think about that. Let it sink in. What Bronnie basically tells us is that men in particular stayed at the coalface, stayed on the hamster wheel, stayed at the grindstone far too long, much longer than they needed to, and they missed out. They missed out on the companionship of their wives, they missed out on seeing their kids grow up, they missed out on the opportunity to travel. For what reason? Who knows? Men are driven by lots of things, probably in reality a bit too competitive, watching too much about what other people are doing, accolades, awards, all of those things I was guilty of in my 30s and 40s. And Bronnie tells us that that's what it's like for a lot of men. When they reach end of life, they look back and they realise that they've missed out. I'm really glad that I quit the rat race when I did. On reflection, I would say it was probably a little bit too young. 44 is very early to retire. But if you remember, I said earlier I'd intended it to be a career break. I just never went back to full-time work. I have continued to work on and off little bits, no more than 1 or 2 days a week, tops, ever since, because I think work for me does involve keeping my brain sharp, and I kind of feel like I'm still in the game. I'm not becoming too dated or past it. The role model for me was my dad. He worked all the way through until well into his 70s for the best part of 20 years of his retirement. I'm still happy to be working a little bit. I just don't believe in full-time work when you're in your 50s and your 60s, especially if you don't have to. So if you can find a way, I think you should retire as soon as you possibly can. The earlier the better, because you'll have the energy and the time and the freedom to do all the things that you really want to do. So that's it. Those are the 5 top things that retirees regret in their 70s and 80s. Which of these regrets hit you the hardest today? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to know. And if you found this video helpful, there is another video that you might want to watch. Why my father's last words convinced me to retire at 44. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.